Hello, I'm Morgan Pehme, Editor-in-Chief of City and State, and this is Last Look. Today, our guest is the co-host of Curtis and the Gov on AM 970, former Governor David Paterson. Governor, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And thanks for joining us last night.
Governor, were there any surprises for you last night in the primary?
I think Bill de Blasio did a little better than I thought he would do, but otherwise I had the numbers pretty well. I mean, little things. John Liu outperformed where I thought he would be. And the Stringer-Spitzer race went about the way I thought it would be, basically 51-49 and for Stringer. I was surprised that Ken Thompson won the DA's race from Charles Hines. It surprised me. But in retrospect, John Sampson, who was not nearly as good a candidate, almost beat Hines in 2005. So they're going to have a runoff in the public advocates race, and the over-under on that is 100 voters.
Mm-hmm. And in the case of Bill Thompson and this possible runoff, I mean, do you think that he should kind of duck out like Anthony Weiner did with Freddie Ferrer, or do you think that he should press it forward if he does qualify for a runoff?
Well, I think that what we have to look at is the fact that Bill de Blasio beat all the other candidates by 15 points. So that's a pretty sizable margin. So Thompson now has to somehow, of the remaining Quinn, Weiner, Liu voters, he's got to basically run the table pretty much, or get something like 60% of those voters. Now, I thought, and I said last night when I was talking to you, that Thompson was the one who could pick up almost all of the Quinn vote. Well, if he could, that would even it up. But they have to do a recount. De Blasio was about 1,500 voters over the 40%. So, generally the absentees and the paper ballots follow the machines. So I think it's more likely that we aren't even going to have this conversation, that de Blasio will win on the machines. If he doesn't, then Thompson has a right as the number 2 person to run against him, and it'll probably be closer than you'd think.
But I imagine that the de Blasio camp, too, is also applying a lot of pressure to Thompson's supporters to, try to move him to concede and to not push it forward.
That's what I would do if I were them, but if they were on the other side, they wouldn't do that. I mean, in other words, everyone's playing the hand they're dealt right now, so nothing surprising. This went on with, remember, this went on in 1997 with the Reverend Al Sharpton and Ruth Messenger.
Yes.
And then it went on again with Freddie Ferrer and Anthony Weiner. But Anthony Weiner's idea to just go down and endorse Ferrer was a masterstroke. See, Anthony Weiner has great ability in him, but then he has another side of him that's self-destructive. But the thing was that about a week and a half later, when they finished the tally, it turned out Ferrer would have been the candidate anyway.
Right.
But Weiner got a big plus for helping the party. The Democratic Party has been out of control for 20 years. Bill Thompson has to think very strongly about that if he interferes for a week and a half in what is only 6 weeks left in a campaign.
Governor, you took some flack for kind of being on both sides of the fence in the Stringer-Spitzer showdown. I mean, what do you think happened in that race? Why wasn't Eliot Spitzer able to pull off the comeback?
Well, I took some flack for being on both sides of the fence from people who are just ignorant, so I don't pay any attention to that. I endorsed Scott Stringer, and I stuck with Scott Stringer. Now, what made my situation a little different is I'm a very good personal friend of Eliot Spitzer's, and I ran as his lieutenant governor, but I said to him, if you want to do something, let me know. He didn't, and there was never any problem between myself and Eliot Spitzer. I spoke to him last night to tell him I'm sorry that things didn't work out. I think what happened in that particular race is Eliot Spitzer got in too late. It isn't just getting the petitions, which was amazing how he could get them in 4 days. It's that you've got to have boots on the ground when you're running for office. This is what Eliot Spitzer learned in 1994. He would have won that primary when he was running for Attorney General against Oliver Capel, and he was running against some other candidates. And when he came back in 1998 and he went through the regular political process, he rather easily defeated Oliver Capel and other candidates that time. So what I think was the problem was that when it came time to the ground game on election day, that organized competition beats paid competition.
I thought the biggest surprise of the night was Lovely Warren winning up in Rochester. Was that a surprise for you?
A little bit, but I supported Lovely Warren and raised money for her, and she's an outstanding lawyer who will be a tremendous mayor. I didn't really know what her chances were, but I wanted to support her because I believe in her so much, and I couldn't be more delighted to hear the results of the Rochester race.
And what do you think? You mentioned the Brooklyn DA's race. I mean, what is the significance of Ken Thompson winning in Brooklyn?
Well, it's interesting because Ken Thompson's taken on some rather controversial cases. He will throw himself into the fire, which is the mark of a leader. I think he'll be an outstanding district attorney now that he's going to have that opportunity. You know, sometimes it's the last hurrah. Sometimes Joe Hines is a great public servant, gave me the first job I had, pretty much, and he served very well. What he did with the drug courts in Brooklyn is a national monument to drug abuse treatment, and he'll be remembered for that. But you know, what happens is after a while, the people that started with you leave, and you get older, and you just don't have the energy for it, and you're working with people you don't know that well, and things start to go wrong. And I had a little experience like that because my first day I was working with people I didn't really know, and things went wrong. But over time, you know, sometimes there's that one race too many that you run.
Do you have any kind of larger thematic takeaways from yesterday? I mean, some people have said this was a change election. It was one that was driven by this issue of income inequality. Do you see any larger themes?
Well, I think the larger themes are the issues that continue to plague the city with poor housing, unemployment, some increases in crime, drug abuse, poor inadequate health care facilities, and often a failed educational system. But I think what we could learn from the election was that the more passionate candidates seemed to get a greater reaction from the public. People want individuals who are more dynamic. And I think that one of the reasons Scott Stringer was able to win the borough president's race is that he is a dynamic candidate and a dynamic person. He does not have the great name recognition or the controversial past or the storied history of a successful attorney general who became governor like Eliot Spitzer. But I've known him since, well, 30 years. And you will see as a controller that he is dynamic. He will challenge the mayor when it's necessary, and he won't challenge the mayor just to do it, just to get his name in the newspaper.
Inez Dickens was a big winner yesterday in her re-election bid. How do you see the race for Speaker of the City Council shaping up now?
Well, Inez Dickens is a candidate for Speaker. I'm not totally familiar who else would like to do it. There certainly is some talent in the City Council, and I think one thing that the new Speaker should think about is not running for mayor, because it didn't work for Christine Quinn, it didn't work for Gifford Miller, it didn't work for Peter Vallone, and I'll keep going back if you want to talk about these City Council. You see, the thing is, for a legislative leader, you are responsible almost like an executive, but you're still a legislature, so it's a very hard position with which to run for higher office. I would better think that a Speaker of the City Council would think more about a greater legislative duty, such as Congress or maybe one of the state legislative positions.
Talking about legislative leaders, I mean, over the last year, Assembly Speaker Silver has been very embattled, and there's been a question of whether he'll be able to move forward in the leadership. Do you think that he'll be able to hold on?
Well, I hope so, because the speaker's problems have not been caused by the speaker. They have, if they exist, been caused by people around him. And I'm just going to tell you a quick story. I took a leadership position away and the salary of Senator Ada L. Smith. She was convicted of throwing coffee on a staff member. She hit another staff member with a phone. She ran over the foot of a state trooper in the parking lot. And this went on and on and on, and the leadership kept protecting her. When I became the leader, I didn't protect her. But when I made that move on her, they had a secret meeting to determine whether or not I should stay as leader. So it's very difficult to ask the leader, the speaker, to perform at 100% when they're working with people who don't. And I think that my heart goes out to the speaker. He's done a lot of great work, and he's done it for 20 years. Now, maybe it's time for new leadership just based on the time, but I don't think it's based on merit or performance.
You don't think that Speaker Silver in any way facilitated a cover-up of some of the malfeasance of his members?
Speaker Silver has blamed himself on occasions for not acting quickly enough. And all I'm doing is explaining to you why he didn't act quickly enough. It's not like he doesn't have a heart or he doesn't have feelings for some of the victims. It's because he was very likely to get thrown out on his ear. And you're looking at someone who almost was for doing the right thing. And by the way, I know he's indicted now and he has a lot of problems, but he'll get his day in court. But Malcolm Smith, how did he lose the majority leadership? Because he wouldn't give Pedro Espada a blank check for $750,000 for a member item. For that, Espada and Montserrat, both of whom now are sitting in jail, went and jumped over with the Republicans. And shame on the Republicans. They accepted them, and that put them back in the majority. So in other words, they did a deal with the devil to get back in the majority. And the condition for them to come back was Smith had to be removed as leader. That is the most hypocritical, corrupt type of action. That's why I appointed a lieutenant governor to put a stop to it in 2009. But to relate it back to the speaker, I'm not making up any excuses. I'm just telling you what the challenge is for leaders. They know what the right thing is. The difficult thing is to try to get a legislature, the caliber of which is inferior to the way it was 20, 25 years ago, to understand that wrong needs to be punished.
What are your expectations for the Morgan Commission? What do you think the commission should be looking into?
Well, I think how some of the member items were distributed, staff hirings by legislators, inappropriate interaction between legislators and people who want things. And I'm not talking about lobbying. Lobbying is a decent profession. But I think that just the appearance that the governor has had enough of this, and so has the Attorney General, will bring about a different type of culture in Albany.
Do you think that the Morgan Commission's findings will ultimately be much ado about nothing, or do you think that they could have some kind of explosive ramifications for business?
Well, you see, you don't always have to measure the commission's work by how many people that they apprehended. It just may be that it stands as a deterrent to those who would act unethically or improperly.
You talked about Malcolm Smith and John Sampson earlier. You know, they were both embroiled in a situation that you were involved in too with AEG. I mean, do you think that the situation with the Aqueduct has been resolved, or do you think that's an ongoing problem?
Well, law enforcement doesn't close these cases in case new evidence comes up. And but it's been about 3.5 years now, so you get the feeling that one of the things Speaker Silver did that was quite admirable is he put in a new protocol by which AEG was eliminated. We selected AEG, but then based on the new protocols that we installed, the two leaders and the governor, they were eliminated. Now, what they did with other people, I what interaction they had with anyone. I don't really know of any, because I had gone through that very, very bad process that was set up in 2001. I'd gone through it in 2008, and it made me feel that there were too many oily people. So when we rebid and AEG and others came, I didn't meet with anybody.
Do you, looking back on your time as governor, are there any regrets that you have?
Oh, I think if I could do it again, I would have done what I recommended to Governor Spitzer, and then when I became governor, didn't do it. Which was that if you want to change institutions, you have to completely undermine the go along, get along, you're here today but we'll be here tomorrow attitude that existed in Albany. You've got to make widespread changes. But I think when I came into office, I lived crisis to crisis. Now, in the beginning, there really were crises because the day I was sworn in, Bear Stearns was saved by the Fed and the country was reeling financially. Then I had a budget due 2 weeks later, and then we had to deal with Mayor Bloomberg's plan to change a lot of New York City's environmental policies. And I think I got caught in the idea that we'll get to organizing the staff and organizing policy and goals and timetables later on, and you get caught in that morass of every day there's an emergency and you have to address it.
And lastly, your radio co-host after last night appears that he will become the first gentleman of Queens. Should Queens be afraid of Curtis Lewa?
Well, he's the first dad of Queens. Not every dad is a gentleman. But Curtis, I love doing the show with him. He's got an incredible sense of humor and a keen knowledge of history and a very good sense of comparison to other events in history. And I sit and I talk to Curtis, and it's almost like dropping by to see a friend, and all of a sudden the 2 hours are gone, and we wishing we had another hour to finish the show. But last night, since Curtis didn't hang around, we had 5 more hours, so I stayed there till midnight, and with your help, by the way.
Governor, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Last Look. For more episodes, please join us on the web at cityandstateny.com.